Hooker. I was Evelyn Hollis when I grew up in White Bluff.
And what do you remember about the town?
Got a couple of days. Well, my mama was Frances Hollis and my daddy was Alva Hollis. And I have brothers and sisters, Ann, Richard, and Denny, Tim Myatt, and Randy Rinaldo. And so what I'm going to tell is today I hope to get to tell some funny little things about White Bluff, how we grew up, and how sweet that it was to grow up here, and how much I love it.
What do you want to start with?
I thought I'd start by the old house. The young ones won't remember, there was an old house that sat right on Old Charlotte. And it was 3 rooms in it, and there was, Aunt Hessie took care of us at that time because our mother was sick, and 8 kids in that house. And we would get up, and this would just kill you right here. We didn't have washcloths or towels if you was poor. So Aunt Hessie would tear a piece of old outing off of something, off an old shirt or something, that would be your wash rag. Be a piece of soap in it, and she'd heat up the water, and every morning, it's 8 kids, and they'd start with the little ones everybody had to wash off, so you know what that meant. I'd just rather not washed off. I think I was cleaner before I washed off, and every kid would take a bath in that wash pan, and it'd just be filthy. But that place has got so many good memories because it smelled so good in the spring and in the summer. There was a big rose at the end of the road there, and the old Charlton place, which to me looked like a mansion. We'd look right down at that. It had an old porch on it, our house did. And then on the other side was Miss Mamie Mike's, which looked like, to me when I was little, Gone with the Wind now. It was so beautiful. And here's this old house with all these kids. And that big rose bush, I'd go out in the summer and pick the roses off of it, and it smelled, the whole neighborhood would smell from that rose bush. And I would put them in fruit jars and they would dry. And Aunt Hessie would come in and just a fussing. Get rid of them dead flowers in here. And then when I got older, and I went to a shop one day and they come out with a potpourri, I thought about those roses. And I had that potpourri, and I say, can't we just put them in a bowl or something? They were dry, and they still smelled good. Didn't have to put no oil on them. And everywhere smelled good. I was telling Jeff a while ago how that nothing smells anymore. You go in the prettiest yards and you don't smell the flowers. But here in the Bluff, a lot of people had beautiful flower gardens, Miss Maud. But Betty and Lula, when we moved over there, we moved around a lot. I always thought Daddy moved every time the rent come due, but I'm sure he didn't. But we moved over at Jess Cathy's old place.
Where was that?
It was on Pleasant View Road, and it's my favorite memory that I have. Any place I've ever lived, even home now, this beats it. It had 3 rooms with an old back porch that Daddy fixed, and so that me and Ann could sleep back there. And so I loved that house, but when we first went over there. Daddy took us over there to see it, and I want you to know, it didn't even have a doorknob. It had a thing like an old toilet would have, or something where you unlatch, but it had a piece of rope on it, and you could tie that rope around something at night on that, and it would lock the door. And we'd get out there at night, it's hot in the summer, and sleep on the porch, and it's the only house Daddy had ever bought. He paid $1,000 for it, I think. And anyway, and I learned to love that place because Betty and Lula Ashworth and Sarah Ashworth lived next door. And they had a wood cooking stove. They had an old house that had 2 rooms in it and an old loft nobody could climb. It looked like the way they get up there, they had these boards. It might have not been how they got up there, but it looked like if they need to get up there, somebody'd have to climb on them boards to get up in that old attic. But anyway, I had to stay all night with them at least 2 nights a week, and I loved it. And people around me go, oh, I wouldn't stay all night down there for nothing, you know, because they had rooster in the house. Lula always had a rooster. And when they cooked breakfast, the rooster would get on the chair and it would sit right there and just watch her cook breakfast, just like it was a dog or something. And the last rooster she had, she called it Little Blue. She had them all named. But that night I'd get in that feather bed and it had straw under it, and I bet that feather bed was 50 years old. And when you'd get in it, it had to be rotten, straw did. You just go all the way down. And in the wintertime, you didn't get cold because the whole bed would like come up around you, and they'd tell me stories at night. And they had a shed that was my dream, because when you're poor in the bluff, you're poor. And I always wanted to sew. And they would have feed sacks and flour sacks, and they'd get them and they'd hand wash them, and she'd take that old iron and put it on the stove and heat it up, and they would iron those pieces and fold them. And when you went in that little shed, it was just like you was going in Lampley's uptown. They had a store up there as far as the material. And I'd save me up a quarter, and I would go down there and I'd buy me one of them feed sacks when I got a quarter, and I'd go home and I'd make me a skirt with it. And sometimes I'd have to get a needle from them to even use, or a piece of thread to make it. And one time, which this is when I got older, they had the prettiest piece down there. And they had a show on TV with Connie Stevens, and it was a Hawaii-like show. And this piece of material looked like one of the skirts or something she'd wear in that show. So I brought that home and I made me a skirt. And I wore it to school. And Linda Wren, I'll never forget it, she had pretty clothes. And she had a pretty sweater and skirt. She said, if you'll let me wear that skirt to the football game, I'll let you wear my tight skirt and my sweater. And I did. She never knew she was wearing a feed sack. She wouldn't have never wore that. It was homemade. It was gathered. And I didn't even have a zipper, but Miss Ladd, that was sewed in White Bluff, that lived across the way when I was a little girl, I'd see her sewing, and so I always wanted to sew on kind of her. And she showed me how to do that and fix me a skirt and put a button on it without putting a zipper, and you could lap it over, like a pocket almost. And I could do that. And sometimes I'd get to go over to Grandma, which was Lunar Darty, and I'd go over there and she'd let me use her sewing machine after I got so old. I just loved that. Have I told the part about Uncle Rack and Walter and the gum?
No.
Well, my grandma lived about a half a mile away, and there was a dirt road in between with an old bridge that's got a million stories I won't tell. But anyway, I'd go over there, and Ann and Richard and Benny would be at the house. And I'd go over there and I'd try to find me a piece of chewing gum. And I'd get up there and I'd get me a chair when Ma wasn't in there, and it had wallpaper. And if you wasn't careful, at gum, they'd chew it for 2 weeks. Back then, juicy fruit gum would last, good Lord, a month. You could still taste it. And so I'd try to pull me off a piece of it without pulling the wallpaper off. But every now and then, that old wallpaper would come off. Ma would come out of there. She'd be having a pure fit about that, getting me tearing her wallpaper. So I'd peel it off. It'd take me all the way back home to get it off, and I'd chew it. Here come Ann, Richard, and Benny wanting to smell my breath to see if I got any gum over there. And they drank all the time. They'd be drunk and they'd put that chewing gum on that wallpaper. And Ma made this cornbread in an old skillet on the stove that wouldn't have nothing but water in it. Water and just old grease. And you'd be hungry, and Ma would say, no, you can't get into that now. Ransom will be in. He'll be wanting a piece of cornbread or whatever. You can't get in the buns. And my sister Ann would go over and steal her a piece. And I'd beg her for a piece of it, maybe coming home from school or something. She'd say, steal your own grandma bread. I won't never forget that. I wrote a poem about that. Yeah, go steal your own.
How was Grandma's house? Do you remember?
It had an old cellar underneath it. Started out with 2 rooms, and then they added this other old room. And Miss Niblett, none of the young people remember her, but she'd live with Ma sometimes, and she had a rocking chair. And I know she had to love kids, but somehow she'd always end up rocking on my bare foot or pinching me or something when I went by. And she sat there and crocheted. Okay, let's see, what else did I want to tell about Betty and Lily? Behind her house, we hadn't talked about that.
No.
Tim would come over, because we weren't raised together even though we're brother and sister, because my mama got sick. So Miss Maud took Tim, and the Rinaldos took my brother Randy, my baby brother. because he was born after Tim, and Mama couldn't take care of us because she wasn't allowed to hold the babies. In fact, we couldn't even be in her presence for a long time, like 4 years. But every Saturday, Miss Maud would come, and by the way, let me put this in here first. She'd pull up and we'd be hoping she had some newspaper, because all the poor people around there, they had to have paper. Most of them didn't have toilet paper, they just had a toilet. But we couldn't wait as she pulled up, and we'd go help her unload them newspaper. And Richard and Benny just fly out there carrying them newspaper down that toilet. Just like we got a big old present or something. But she'd bring Tim every Saturday morning, and he was the meanest little thing you've ever seen. Everybody thought he was good except his brothers and sisters. And one time, Richard, my brother Richard, we had to draw water out of a well. That's another thing. We didn't think we was poor, but we was. All the people in the country had a well and a toilet. But anyway, my brother Richard, it was all he could do. He's a little boy, and he's drawing. It's got a big old rod right here. And I don't know if you've ever seen one of the buckets, but they're long, and they hold a lot of water. And they're heavy. And he had to pull that up a long way, so we're all out there playing. Tim's running around with his little sack of candy he'd always bring to 2-year-old Pops. Make Ann do everything, told him or whatever for him. But anyway, he was drawing that water up, and Tim decided he was going to run over there and just shove my brother down for no reason. Just went over there, and the water was up. He was ready to get it up and put it in the bucket, and that thing, the rod started going around and around back down with that water in it, and it got Richard right in the back of the head right there, just beating his brains out. And so he just nearly fainted. He was laying on the ground, and Tim started screaming, and that was in the old house that burned down that I love so much. So he's at the window, Mama is, and she comes running out there, and she thought Richard done something to Tim, because Tim's going, Richard, Richard, and we're all screaming about Tim and Richard. So she grabs Richard up, grabs her a switch, and just wears him out. And he don't even know what he's doing. He probably don't even know he's getting a whooping, and Tim's just standing there. That look right there. Just exactly, just like I'm so innocent, I have done nothing. It took Mama 30 minutes to realize what had happened. I think that's why Richard drank when he got a little bit older too, so I'm kind of getting hit in the head like that, but anyway. Then we would go in the summer at the back of Betty and Lula's, that was woods back in there, and Mr. Calvin Larkins has the most beautiful farm. It had a silo, I think it's still there in the barn, and that's what you saw. In the country, it was just beautiful out on Pleasant View Road. They named it right. It was beautiful, even though it was old houses. When you look back there, you saw Mr. Calvin's farm, and then across the way, Mr. Shelton would either plant, most of the time, corn. And it would smell so good. You could smell the silks when the corn started coming in. And that's when we'd sleep out on the porch, and you could just smell that. And there was a big old light up there that the city had put up there, and you could just see it shining across there. But we'd go across there to Betty and Lula's and their woods, and there was, what do you call that thing we'd swing on? Grapevine.
Grapevine.
And the honeysuckles was just everywhere. They were that deep where they died, and they just kept on. And it was like a big bed or something, or one of them things the kids jump on. And we would swing on that, and we'd stay wouldn't we, Tim, all day long. Of course, there wasn't nothing to have at the house but a drink of water. You didn't run in and get you a Coke or nothing like that. You'd go get you, I'll tell about the dipper in a minute, but anyway. We'd stay there all day and play, and it'd nearly be dark, and Mama would tell us to come in. Miss Maud gonna come get Tim. And we never got tired of playing. And then Jeff Shelton had an old barn for the airplane that they used to fly.
Whose airplane was that?
I thought it was...
Julian Buttrey's?
Yeah, I couldn't remember. But anyway, but the barn was just left. They didn't fly the plane anymore. Tim had been up in the plane, I think. But, and then the blackberries.
Yeah.
We hadn't talked about that. That was in the summer. And you was made to pick blackberries. That was it. Did I done tell about that? Are you sure?
No.
Well, we'd get up at daylight, and Mom would make all of us get ready with our buckets to go pick berries. Of course, all the neighbors was doing the same thing, and it was, I can't think of the name of that field they called it, but it was behind the old church there, and it was a big
Out on
field.
Hawkins Road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Pleasant View. And so Mom would start saying, now you gotta hurry up because Grover Cathy and his kids will be coming and they'll get all the berries in the front, them and Betty and Lula, and we'll have to go way back in there, way back deep in there. Just, if you've ever been blackberry picking, I mean, it will tear you up. And so we'd head out there, and about the time we'd just about get there, here come Grover Cathy and his little kids, and he'd be saying, hurry up, get yourself up there, Eugene, you know what up there, said, them you know what Hollises, that bunch will have every berry there picked in the front, we'll have to go back. Exactly what we had said was what he was saying to the kids every time. But we'd pick the blackberries, and a lot of times Mama would sell them, and we'd get shoes or school clothes or just use the money, and then she'd make blackberry jelly and everything out of them. Let's see, I was going to tell about walking to Eva Taylor's. She was a very precious person. Her whole family was precious to me. They had good memories there. It was all dirt road. Is that Jocelyn Branch?
Yeah.
And it was a long way from my house down there, and there wasn't many houses on that road. I think only one. And might have been two, but it'd start getting dark before I'd get there. I'd beg Mama to let me go, and they'd always welcome me if they didn't know I was coming or not, and I'd walk over there. But these old people would tell us stories about the whistling Patty. Now, I can't make the sound. I used to could, they'd tell us, but I can't whistle no more. But she's supposed to scream like a woman. She's supposed to be white, which was a lie and tortured me all my life. Even though I know it's a lie, I can still get scared telling it. Every time I get nearly there, a thing get behind me, I hear it. Every time I'd hear it back in there in the woods. And I'd be flying, a lot of times I'd be barefoot, I'd be flying, just couldn't wait to get to Eva's. And I'd hit that branch, and sometimes it wasn't water on my dress when I got there. I'd be so scared where I'd get. I'd be flying, but they'd always welcome me. I'd get there and I'd stay all night. Well, they'd all go to sleep. And they had a little old house just like ours, had 4 rooms in it. And all this, the girls and all of us sleep back there in that one bedroom. They'd all be asleep, and I'd be sitting there just like this, looking out the window the whole night. They'd talk about the whistling Patty, that's all they talked about. And the old people would just scare us to death about it. Then later I scared my children about it, I hate that. But anyway, one thing, not wanting too many cars go down our road. Wayne Niblett would go down with an old log truck. Mr. Niblett owned the grocery, which is right across the way there. But before him, Walter Woodard owned that grocery. And we'd walk up there, about half a mile, and get for $1. This was a real treat for us, because, I mean, we eat beans if you have potatoes. Mom made biscuit out of water and lard, forget the milk. And it was good. I done that the other night, didn't I? And, but anyway, we'd go up there, and if you got $1, you'd get, Mom would say, now get a pound of bologna and get a loaf of bread. And she'd always say, and don't get into the bread, because then you smelt that bread. You don't smell bread anymore. It would be in that old sack, and it would smell, it just all around you. You could smell the yeast in it. Well, I'd always steal me a piece, and she knew I would. But with all of us kids, she didn't want enough salmon. You get a pound of bologna, a loaf of light bread, a little jar of mustard, and some Cokes if you took the Coke balls now. Out of that $1, you might get a penny or 2 back. And you'd walk back home, and boy, that was a real treat for us. We just really have a good time with that. That was something else. But about the car, I'd tell, there was some of my friends, the Wrens that lived in down on Sulphur Holler, going down the other side of White Bluff across the tracks. And they'd always say, she's the fastest walker I've ever seen in my life. I ain't never seen nobody. And if they make fun of me, they'd call me Hassie. That was my aunt's name, Aunt Hassie. And they'd call me Hassie because she's kind of hot-tempered a little bit and do things. But anyway, Jay Cathy would come along most of the time. Just about every time I'd go walk up there and something. Jay Cathy had a car and an elephant, one of the elephants, monk elephants, what they call them. He had a car. And you hear him coming a long way. So anyway, I'd ride up there with them and I'd say, y'all meet me in the bluff. Well, they'd be coming up the Sulphur Water Hill and I'd come from way over here. And I'd beat them before they ever got up to the tracks, and they'd just be having a fit, not knowing that I rode most of the way with Jay Cathy. And before that, Mr. Pete Howell, he had 2 old mules. I used to remember their names, I don't now. And he didn't talk. He wouldn't say nothing. He wouldn't talk to you, you know. He's a real quiet man. Oh, I just loved him. Him and Miss Nellie. And their house is still standing over there. But it was on the Hawkins Road, and we'd go down Taylortown. And if I'd hear him coming with the music, Mom, you wouldn't let your kid do this now. I'd holler, Mom, I'm going to the bluff. And I just rode down there when he'd go make that turn, and he wouldn't say nothing. He'd, whoa, he'd stop, and I'd jump on the back of the wagon, let my feet hang down, and go all the way to Mike's with him. You know, didn't think nothing about it. And the parents would let the kids just go anywhere. But when I got older, I'd get in a lot of trouble for that. I'd have to hang out the clothes, and Mama would tell me, you're not going to the bluff when I got older. I'd love to go to the bluff. They had a little thing, and it's a barber shop now, but we'd call it the Sugar Shack. And the Owens, some of them owned it. I don't remember everybody's name. We've gotten old now, but no, you're not going. It wasn't nothing but a little jukebox, and she'd sell potato chips and Cokes, and we would dance up there and have fun. That was just the most fun place.
That?
The house over in that area, you go across the railroad track and it seemed like you make a left, and I think there's a barber shop or something there now. The building's still there. But Mom would say, no, you're not going. I'd put on my shorts, you know. Boy, she watched that too back then. You didn't wear them shorts. I'd roll them up and I got on. But anyway, I'd hang out the clothes, and when I hung out that last clothespin on that line, I just had to bluff, knowing I was going to get a whooping when I got home. I'd stay all day long. And when I got home, it'd be worth it because we'd just have the best time up there having fun, the teenagers, but she would wear me out. And that's one thing they done back there, they disciplined. I don't completely agree with that now.
I guess not.
Well, I don't, but I mean, sometimes a kid does need a little switching, but we'd get it. You didn't, and if you said anything dirty, whew, Tim come over, and they was just like the perfect family, no cursing. And he come over, and Suzanne and Kitty or somebody had cursed in front of him, saying the S word, okay? I won't say it. So Miss Maul come talk to my mother about it, you know. Tim's picking up some bad language over here. So Mama whooped all of us, every one of us. And I said, no, we didn't say that in front of him. We don't say that. And come to find out, when he got about grown, he told me where he picked it up at. But boy, I'm telling you, but my sister said a bad word. And so my sister Ann, she's Ann Groves now. Some of the stuff I want to tell about her, I want her, she won't speak to me. But anyway, so I heard her and I told her, I said, if you don't do everything that I asked you to do all day long, I'm telling Mama. So first I wanted her to ride me on her neck all day long. And she'd go by the window at that old house, and the window went like that. It was old, the window didn't go up and down, the kitchen was real low, and it went, Mama would be standing there in the kitchen. Ann would be bawling. Finally, she stuck her head out that window and she said, Ann, I don't feel sorry for you. Anybody that would tote anybody around like that all day long is just something wrong with them. And I'd just be whispering in her ear all day long. Everything I'd take it for everything, because you'd really get a whipping back then. Now, what else is I going to say? I don't know. Let's see.
What about the school? What do you remember about?
It was a family. That's all I can say about it. I didn't do good in school. Only when I got a little bit higher grade, some of the teachers took an interest, said, I know you can do this. Miss Annis and Miss Catherine Nichols, they took an interest in me. And I thought they was fussing at me, but they said, I know you can do this. I didn't want to do it. All Mom would say when you got home is, did you get your homework? Nobody ever checked it, you know. And no, you didn't get your homework. And but everybody knew everybody in the school. They knew every house who lived there in the bluff when I was raised up. They knew every grandparent. They knew every baby that was born. And anybody that died or got sick, somebody, Miss Maud, my mama was really good about running. If somebody got sick, she'd walk. Daddy'd have an old car every now and then, but most of the time he didn't. And we walked everywhere. We'd walk around the roads, on the country roads, and even when Tim got grown, we'd walk and sing. We'd just sing. We'd be walking, the neighbors would be out, you know, we'd just walk around and sing. And that's what we'd do, we'd play rook. The Cathys would come up, the neighbors, and Mom would get out the rook cards, and they'd get sticky. Now, you probably ain't never seen this, you're young. But you had one deck of rook cards, and all the stuff would almost wear off of them, and they'd get sticky. And Mom would take some kind of powder she'd have, and she'd pour all over them rook cards and stack them back up, and they'd be slick again a little bit, and we could play with them. But we'd play till 2 o'clock in the morning, and she'd fry potatoes or something like that, or make biscuit for a snack. And the first time I met Robert, my husband, you know, his family had potato chips and Cokes, and we'd get a Coke sometimes, but hardly ever. But I told him to come up, you know, and he come up in his 57 Chevy. I won't never forget that. I was up in a tree, just up there looking around. The road was still dirt, and we did have a phone then. Linda Wren called me and said, I got somebody I want you to meet. He's driving a sharp 57 Chevy. Well, I didn't believe her. I went back and got in the tree. And I'm sitting up there, and here comes this smoke, this dust, you know, from the road, and he's coming up. By the time he knocked on my door, I was already had my candy pink lipstick on and my dress, waiting on him. And they had little perfumes, Apple Blossom and Blue Walls, and they were a dime at Coombs. And I'd get me a bottle of that when I get to go to Dickson. So things has changed. They were wonderful back then. Some bad things, but it's funny about the bluff. When I think about it, I only remember the good things. It could go on and on for days telling stories about how wonderful. The people were wonderful. Everybody was like a family, and everybody pitched in. When that old house burned down that I love so much, the neighbors pitched in and helped start to build the house, the foundation. I remember a bunch of men over there one day, and they started building that. That other house is over there now, but it never meant as much to me as the old house that I hated when I first saw it. I just loved it.
Where did you go when the house burned?
To Buck Springs, there was a house
Where
down
was
there on Taylortown. Those houses are all gone. But I felt like we was in paradise when we moved down there, even though I was homesick for the old house. The creek was right there. There was another old house beside of it, and I remember the people would open their windows all the way up in the summer, and my memory of that is it had big windows, and when they raised the windows, Mama had some old lace curtains like on it, thin curtain, and it would just blow across the whole house. The curtains would. You don't see that anymore. You never see people letting, you know, it was, and the spring was down there, and it was almost like it had an air conditioner. I don't know how much more time I got, but I want to tell about the first air conditioner if I got time.
Yes.
I'm sure other people in White Bluff had air conditioning. We just didn't know about it. And Daddy happened to have an old car, and he'd be gone 10 days, he'd come in 5. He said, I want you young'uns to see something. You're just not going to believe it. And he got us all in the car, and we went to Dickson, and I mean, that was a big deal. Going to Dickson was like, whoa. Nashville was really a big deal. But anyway, we got in the car, and I don't know if that was, what was that store? Vogue, what was that?
In Dickson?
That had that air conditioning.
I don't know.
He said, you're not going to believe it. It was a hot summer day, and he said, I just don't touch nothing. I just want y'all to go in there. He said, you're not going to believe it. And I don't remember years. I just remember we was little. And we went, you could tell they didn't want us to touch nothing, you know, had their nose up in the air a little bit. You know, the women wait on you. I hope they're not hearing this. Hope they never hear it. But we was kids, and it's like, watch these kids. You know, they don't need to be touching nothing in here. Had fine things in their clothes and stuff. And we walked through there, and we was just amazed. It was just freezing in there. Just, you know, because we'd never, that's the first time I ever remember feeling anything cool in the summer like that. And Betty and Lula, now you said they had an ice thing. I didn't know where they got it from. But they'd come down the road, and somebody would let them use these prawn things up in White Bluff, and they'd be carrying, they'd done walked all the way from White Bluff, what, 2 miles, mile and a half, carrying this big block of ice. And it wouldn't even be melted. And it was be in the hot summer, and they'd put it in their ice box because they didn't have electricity. It was really something the way that everything was back then. Wonderful for me. There was things I was disappointed in because we didn't have much, but now I wouldn't take nothing for it. I like to paint, and when I paint iris, I can just smell Betty and Lula's iris. I'd go down there and peep through them as a little girl, and I think, when I get grown, I'm going to paint flowers, and I do. But I used to get out their picture to inspire me. Tim made a picture of him, and when I would paint my iris, I paint in my kitchen, I'd set that picture there of them, and I could just almost smell those iris. They was set back in time. We weren't set back as far as them. We had a refrigerator, and we had a cook stove and a ring and washer, but they didn't have electricity. And they lived like people lived 100 years before them. They raised everything. They had chickens. They had a garden. They made their own vinegar. I'll never forget going down there. Oh boy, I don't know if I shouldn't tell this. But I didn't know what vinegar looked like when it was being made. I smelled something. I said, that stinks really bad. It was out there close to my stuff that I buy, and I didn't appreciate it very much. I was afraid it'd start stinking like that. And I always like things that smell good. Well, they had this big crop thing, and it had apples in it. I guess they were just rotten. That's what made the vinegar. And it had this thing on top of it they called a mother, which almost made me faint. I almost threw up. And I wouldn't eat nothing with vinegar on it until I got grown. And then Mama made pickle, and I did not never want. After I saw that, it was repulsive, you know. But they made everything from their vinegar to tell them the story about the walnuts, and you coming by them holding them walnuts.
I was in college, and I had a triple major, and I had just a little while to get back to school, and I managed a steakhouse in Clarksville. Well, I went by to see Mother and Daddy and Gran and Granddaddy, and I had about 15 minutes. It was very stressful, had a lot going on, and Betty and Lula gathered walnuts in the fall, and they would put them in the road, you know, out there on the side of the road, and the cars would run over them, and then they would crack them and spend all afternoon out there doing that. And I was really stressed, and it was a great fall day, and they had cut this tree down, and both of them were straddled of this trunk with their legs on one side to the other, and they were laughing and talking, and I thought, what a great life. No stress, very happy. Didn't matter how the other part of the world was living. They had a good time.
They did. And
enjoyed everything.
And I don't think they ever, I know they slept when I was down there, but we had a toilet. And this is how, you'll probably cut this out, but If you got up during the night and Mama wouldn't let you have a slop jar like everybody else had. No, you get up and go to the toilet. Well, I'd try to sneak out beside the house. And I'd go out there. And I swear, they had a 5-cell light or something. It was like one of these things a policeman has, is all I know. And they'd shine it up there on me. It might be midnight. And they'd go, Evelyn, you get down there at that toilet. It was awful. And it made, so I wouldn't do it for a long time. Then I'd try to get out there again. And they must have never slept. Or they could hear the door slam or something. I don't know. And then they'd come tell Mama. It was just something all the time like that going on.
What was their last name?
Ashworth.
Ashworth. Now, were they sisters, or what was their relationship?
A mother, a stepmother, a mother, and a daughter. And they made me and my sister and my brothers a lot the way that we are, and our family did too. We had a beautiful family. They were rough, talk rough, but they all stuck together, and it was just the best memories for me was growing up here in the Bluff. Had lots of friends. Still got a few I went to school with. Linda Wren, I still go visit her, and we'll talk about old times. And she was a Darty. My family was Dartys and Hollises. My mother was a Darty, and so.
Well, tell about the guys throwing the rocks on the house.
Oh my! I won't name names of this, okay? But the corn was in the cornfield, and 2 guys from school. They're both gone now, but I still wouldn't want. But anyway, I don't know why I don't tell their name, but I don't. But one of them had an old car, and I'd hear them come down the road. Like I said, you didn't hear. I mean, it wasn't like looking at an airplane. We'd run out and look at an airplane, but still, there wasn't that much traffic out in here. And so I heard the car coming. I knew whose it was, and I got out there. I know they're gonna do something mean. And they rocked Betty and Lula's house. Yeah. Next night, here come that car again. I said, whoa. I said, I mean, they had an old shotgun, and they would use it, and they'd let you know they're going to use it. What was that gun called? Was it buckshot? It's something that, wouldn't go way, way off. But anyway, this one guy was running down through that corn, going to throw some rocks on the door, going down here, and then the other guy's going to meet him at the other end, pick him up in the car. And they was waiting on him. And they shot them. I mean, they started shooting that gun. And you could hear one of them had a certain laugh. And I know who it was. But anyway, he laughed, and when he laughed, I knew who it was. And I never heard nothing about nobody getting hurt or nothing like that, but I mean, they poured it. Both of them poured it to him. They was waiting out there at that gate when they done that time. And that never did happen. I think it's the same group that drug a half of a horse up there in front of the bank one time. I think it was that same group. But I won't say names because I really couldn't see them, but that laugh was a dead giveaway at school. It's just, we could go on and on. But
Tell me about Clyde. How did she fit in?
Clyde was Betty and Lula's sister, and she lived in Colesburg. And her husband come up one day, and Betty and Lula wanted me to go with them. And I was a little bit afraid of the man, but I loved Clyde. So I get in the car, and that's the first time I ever tasted okra. I never would taste it. And now okra is like, it's expensive, but back then, if a kid saw it and it's slimy, they didn't want to eat it even though it'd be fried. So we sat down at her table. This is my memory of Clyde. And that whole old homemade wood table, and they would have the tablecloths, they call them wax cloths or something. All cloths. They were different than they are now. And every year, everybody that either get them a new linoleum and a new tablecloth. But she had that table set up. And she had a thing of okra that big fried. And she said, you're going to eat some. And I started crying. I said, I'm not eating that. I'm never eating that. If I never eat another bite in my life, I'm not eating no okra. Of course, the old people called it okra. Yeah, you're going to eat it. you gonna eat one piece of it, or you're not eating nothing else on the table. I didn't care, I wasn't gonna eat it, so she made me eat it. I nearly ate the whole thing. Now it's about my favorite thing in the world, but every time I fix okra, I think about Clyde and that okra.
What do you remember about Sarah?
Everybody thought she was a witch. She was all humped over, but she didn't talk very much, and she was actually Betty's stepmother. And everybody was afraid of her, and I loved her better than anything in this world. And they'd go to church. One of them would go in the mornings, and one of them would go. One of them would go in the morning, one would go in the evening. They guarded that house, even though it didn't have nothing, you know. None of them. There was always somebody at that house. And one morning, we didn't have a lot to play with, but we'd play with the roly-polies. And it was before church time, and me and Ann's out there playing. Oh, I told the name. Well, you knock that part out. One of my family members was out playing with the roly-polies. I was, and I got a bunch of them. And I wanted to be the doctor because I wanted to give my sister some pills. She started crying, bless her heart. She's younger than I am. I don't want them pills. I said, if you want to get well, you will accept these pills, and I've got to insert them in your nose. So I put them roly-polies in her nose. And about the time I got them all in there, she's just a gag. And she said, I can feel them. I can feel them up in my head. I can feel them in my throat. So anyway, you have to cut her name out. She'll never speak to me again. So we go on to church, and all the way up there, Mama's getting on to Ann. I wish you'd straighten out. We get up there, and we're sitting. Benches is just like this. And Betty and Lula's right here, and we're over here. And Ann starts sneezing. And she starts coughing. And them roly-polies just started flying out her nose. Everywhere. And Betty and Lula going, And they're whispering. Nobody can see it but Betty and Lula. Mama don't even see it. So Ann's about to throw up, so she runs out to the toilet and stays out there. Mama never did know what was wrong with Ann. She said, that made me sick. I nearly threw up in church. But Betty and Lula's eyes were that big. And nobody could see it but them, what was going on. But I'd pay my cousin Judy several pennies when there was 8 of us in the family up in White Bluff, and Aunt Hessie had us, just to let me be the doctor, because I just loved to torture them kids. And I'd take them, I'd get them roly-polies, and I would pay her to let me put them roly-polies up her nose, and then she'd start hollering and carrying on. I was a mean kid too, just like Tim. Okay, that's all I got wrote down, I think. There's lots more that I can't tell.
We'll get to those later on. I'll
I doubt it.
once you get